Hello and welcome to CineMaine, where we look at films that are connected to Maine, whether they be set in Maine, filmed in Maine, or have any other loose connections to the state of Maine. And today we are looking at The Monkey. No, but might as well be given what this movie is like. Yeah, that's the one. The dark horror comedy based off of Stephen King's 1980 short story of the same name. Produced by James Wan and written and directed by the son of the guy who played Norman Bates in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Oz Perkins. He recently directed the acclaimed Nicolas Cage film Longlegs and was also an extra in Not Another Teen Movie and the 2009 Star Trek? Huh, that's kinda cool actually, I liked both of those movies. Anyway, the basic premise for this film involves twin brothers Hal and Bill Shelburne acquiring a wind-up drum-playing toy monkey after their father disappears. It's worth noting that he disappears after trying to get rid of this thing because it's a walking Final Destination movie. That's something that Hal and Bill end up discovering for themselves once they find this monkey. Every time someone turns the key, it bangs on the drum for a bit, which always leads to someone dying in a manner that feels like something you'd see in a Final Destination film. It's kinda like that anime where you write down someone's name and cause of death in a notebook and it leads to that very death happening. Except the monkey picks its victims and their cause of death completely at random. Not helping is that everyone who dies because of this toy just so happens to be close to Hal and Bill. Eventually, they get the bright idea to lock it up and throw it down a well. 25 years pass, and the brothers are now estranged. And just like Pennywise, the monkey makes a resurgence after all this time has passed, causing more gruesome freak accidents to occur locally. All the while, Hal is an absentee father to his teenage son Petey in an effort to keep him safe. But just so happens to be spending his 1 week of the year with him when the monkey emerges. What an awkward time for all of this to be happening, am I right? Okay, so being based off of a short story from Stephen King, one of the film's connections to Maine is already pretty obvious. Let's face it, whenever anyone thinks of an author from Maine, King is easily the first writer that comes to mind. Hell, he's one of the first writers that people think of when they think of the horror genre in general. He really put us on the map. But the connections to Maine don't stop there. After the tragic passing of the second person to die because of this evil monkey, Hal and Bill moved to Casco, Maine to be with their aunt and uncle. I'd go into more detail, but seeing as though this movie just came out this year, I'm trying not to spoil anything for those who haven't seen it yet. The movie alludes to the Casco setting a couple of times when Hal and Bill are all grown up. There's a scene where Hal tries calling Bill back after receiving a call from him out of the blue when he's revisiting their childhood home. The name of the phone book he uses is called Cascotel. Obviously, that's meant to be a pun about it being a phone book for Casco. Yet this name appears again during the third act of the movie when Hal, his son, and Ricky Ramone over here meet up with Bill at a hotel that he's located at. The name of the place is, you guessed it, Cascotel. This name is used for a phone book and a local hotel. That must be so confusing for any non-locals. Nevertheless, Casco is a real town in Maine that's located in Cumberland County, about 50 minutes away from Portland. Ignoring the on-the-nose puns I mentioned earlier though, I can definitely tell that most of this movie is set in Maine just by watching it. While filming actually occurred throughout Vancouver and other places in British Columbia, the locations used could easily pass for Maine. There are plenty of visual similarities to the aesthetics of Maine's small towns, rural areas, and motels that are nailed to a T. This film may not have actually been filmed here in Maine, but I really have to give credit that the filmmakers did a great job immersing the viewer into the film's geographic setting. As far as the setting of the film's time period, well, let's just say that this clip of Theo James screaming into a pillow is a metaphor for how I feel about that. At least, when it came to the sections involving Hal and Bill as children. The movie establishes that these scenes are supposed to be set in 1999, but look at this. If you lived through 1999 and remember it very well, does this look anything like how life looked back then? No, of course it doesn't. It looks like 1979. Look at the way everyone's dressed. Look at the way the places are all decorated. They display the on-screen text confirming that it's 1999 because you wouldn't have been able to guess that if the movie didn't spell it out for you. Where's all the Pokemon merchandise? How come no one is playing Limp Bizkit? He did it all for the monkey! Oh, wait. No, he didn't. But you see my point. I might still be in my 20s, but I'm still old enough to remember 1999. I mean, vaguely, but I remember enough of it to know that this isn't what it looked or felt like. The only thing I noticed during these scenes that actually add to the 1999 setting is this one bit where we see a poster for Goosebumps in the kid's room. And personally, I have to thank Chris Stuckman for all his Goosebumps references back in the day for why I would know that. Because I didn't grow up with Goosebumps that much. I mean, I remember reading some of the books when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, but I didn't even know there was a TV series until I was much older because of him, so thanks for helping me catch that reference, Chris. Now, as far as the rest of my overall thoughts on this movie go, along with who I'd recommend it to, it's complicated. That is to say, I don't think I've ever seen a film blur the line between horror and comedy this intensely in my whole life. And I've seen a lot of horror comedies, so I know what I'm talking about. The movie deals with serious subject matter that has been portrayed in other Stephen King stories before, but the movie displays them in a manner that either feels so over the top, so deadpan, or sometimes even both simultaneously, that it honestly feels like it's somehow trying to satirize a lot of King's more common tropes while being an adaptation of one of his works. With other King adaptations that have been hard to take seriously in the past, a lot of the funnier things have felt unintentional. But after watching this film and even reading what the director had to say when approaching making it, I'm convinced that this was completely intentional. And granted, there were plenty of times when I did laugh at just how absurd things got, particularly at just how over the top and off the rails a lot of the deaths in this movie felt. I thought the opening scene to Final Destination Bloodlines was over the top, but I think I might owe that film an apology, to say the least. I'll also give credit to how creative a lot of the death scenes in this film are, even if they are very exaggerated. Yet this movie's subject matter involves losing a loved one suddenly, at a young age no less. And the movie does show that grief from such a sudden loss can impact people in drastically different ways, which feels pretty serious in and of itself. And parts like this are at least taken seriously enough to be plausible. This wasn't off-putting for me personally, but I could easily see this being incredibly off-putting for some, particularly if they've lost a loved one recently. I'll admit I'm kinda surprised I myself wasn't more put off by a lot of these aspects. I'll admit there are a lot of things in this movie I do genuinely like. For starters, the acting in this film is perfect. You'd think that this film about a killer wind-up toy monkey would be difficult to take seriously, and it kinda is, but the actors in this film all do a great job at making the scenarios their characters are in feel very believable. Or at least, how said characters would react in said situations. I was particularly impressed by Christian Convery and Theo James, who both play the Shelburne twins during childhood and adulthood. I'm kinda starting to notice that a lot of movies this year have involved a lead actor giving a dual performance. Nevertheless, both do an excellent job at making Hal and Bill seem very distinct from one another when it comes to their personalities. And the way each brother is during childhood and adulthood feels consistent throughout. I look at Hal as an adult and think this is what this kid would grow up to be after experiencing what the monkey has caused. And it's the same when I look at Bill. If nothing else, this film does a great job showcasing the range that both of these actors have. The supporting cast is good too, such as Colin O'Brien as Hal's son Petey, who's been kept very out of the loop when it comes to what his father has gone through. And when it comes to his relationship with his estranged father, it was easy to see where both sides are coming from. Petey's father has kept him at a distance his whole life, and it's easy to see why he'd be upset by this. In most movies like this, the father would still be keeping their child at a distance to keep them safe, but there's usually that plot hole of why the father doesn't just tell their kid what's going on. Because most of the time that would make things a lot easier. But here, it's easy to see why Hal doesn't just tell Petey or the boy's mother, because how do you explain that a toy monkey has caused people close to you to die in freak accidents without sounding like you're on drugs? It's an unbelievable situation, but the way everyone reacts to it is where the believability comes in. I also liked Tatiana Maslany as Hal and Bill's mother, and I also enjoyed the cameos from Adam Scott and particularly Elijah Wood, who's playing heavily against type as Petey's stepfather, who is such a jagoff that I couldn't help but laugh when he was on screen. Though this does bring me to the film's tone. This is something that I think will either make or break this film for different people. While there are occasional moments where it takes its subject matter somewhat seriously just to show that, oh yeah, the things that happen to Hal and Bill are actually very disturbing, and the ways that these events affect both Hal and Bill into adulthood is realistic enough that you would buy either person turning out the way they do after going through what they went through. You understand it so much that you can easily see it being incredibly jarring for other people when the movie decides to poke fun at itself. But to be fair, this movie's about a wind-up toy monkey that kills people, so I can kinda understand why it doesn't want to always take itself so seriously. It's kinda like looking at the Chucky franchise. There's a limit to how seriously you can take a premise such as a possessed doll who kills people. So after a while, the people making those films decided to start poking fun at their own premise, and the movies and shows ended up being all the better for it. So I kinda get why Oz Perkins made certain choices with this film's tone in that regard. And I'd be lying if I said there weren't things in this film that made me laugh. This visual of Adam Scott trying to set the toy monkey on fire with a flamethrower is both hilarious and awesome. And like I said earlier, Elijah Wood did make me laugh whenever he was on screen. And the one death scene I think I might be able to show on YouTube, well, the joke writes itself. What's ironic is that having read the short story after seeing this film, I noticed a lot of the Stephen King tropes that were somewhat satirized here were actually absent in the source material. There are, of course, the generic Stephen King bullies that pick on Hal when he's at school, but this film switches it up by making the school bullies girls. Okay, I think I've only ever seen that happen once or twice before. And even then, the girls are usually picking on other girls instead of some boy. But this scene wasn't even in the short story. In fact, a lot of things in this film are drastically different. The original story was less gory than this film for the most part, and the death scenes felt a lot simpler too. But that's not all. You know how I mentioned earlier that in this film, Hal is not only just estranged from his brother, but also his ex-wife and son? Well, not only is Hal still married in the original story, but to top it all off, they actually have 2 sons together instead of just the one. On top of that, Hal's wife actually has a name in the original story. But in this movie, she's just credited as Hal's ex-wife and Petey's mother.
That's about it.
Also, the Bill we see in this film is 100% different from the one in the original story. In that version, his character wasn't super memorable, but in this film, they not only made him a massive jerk, but let's just say that, and I apologize if I'm getting into spoilers here, he's such a jerk to Hal as a child that at one point, Hal turns the key to Quentin Tarantino film that Uma Thurman starred in, if you will. There's also this goal that Bill sets out to achieve as an adult that is so needlessly convoluted that it made me feel like Dr. Evil's son Scotty in the first Austin Powers film when he's questioning why Dr. Evil's just letting Austin and Miss Kensington get away. It is that strange. I'll admit I'm fine with most of these choices as Hal's other son in the original story I barely remember, and I can understand why they made Hal estranged from his family since a lot of people he was close to as a kid became victims of terrible incidents the monkey caused. And the movie makes it pretty clear that he's hoping to keep them safe, which is completely understandable. If you're not familiar with the source material, this probably won't be a problem for you. It wasn't for me, and for the most part still isn't. But if you're someone who loves the original source material, the changes might be distracting for you. So yeah, overall, I can see a lot of people either really loving or really disliking this. I will give credit that as far as Stephen King adaptations go, this one may only occasionally feel kingly, as I've said in the past. But in a bizarre way, it does stand out from a lot of other adaptations of King's works, and to its credit, the movie has a sufficient runtime and doesn't overstay its welcome. I've certainly seen worse movies and shows based off of King's work. I was curious to see what this was all amounting to in the end. I wasn't bored with this like a certain other King adaptation I reviewed recently. In fact, I'm actually very curious to check out this director's other movies. And if a movie makes me want to look at more films in the director's filmography, it's already doing something right, I suppose. As a comedy, if you're very put off by films that have an extremely twisted sense of humor, then obviously you'll want to avoid this one. But if that style of humor is your thing, and you like the idea of taking a lot of Stephen King's tropes and displaying them in a satirical manner, topped off with Final Destination style scares being scattered throughout, then I am confident that you'll appreciate how this film plays to the beat of its own drum. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and also be sure to check out CineMaine's website and be on the lookout for future CineMaine content.